on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they like to get paid.
I too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money
So
there.
the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin. Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to – he's doing interviews with that where he broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? It's just he happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have –
wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you're found out how to be successful, and if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You know, you could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it, but it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your success. They're setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke, right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And, I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down.
And then when you have him on, there's a lot of I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming and
not having sort of like it's maybe not big enough. You know, they're good people. A lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding. I mean, he was really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane. But
what is it's a crypto exchange, right? So how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto, everything, I don't have access to the book. Like I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, "Where's the money?" He goes, "Well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda." And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through him for like all these and it just was kind of I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to even before that I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like the fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire. You know, he's sort of the next Warren Buffett, that when everything goes wrong, crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot
go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new. They bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it. Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also repute outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of
involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019. You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put a service that said you cannot move, like when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people? Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader stuff. You're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? The problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral. You're the CEO as of 2020. He hands it to this a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did
initially. He thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone. And
Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who comes. He's the son of two Harvard lawyers.
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA?
I don't really understand what's going, like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one, because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all,
might be one of the first, like, trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys. Really going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal, and we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there, and all of a sudden it starts this firestorm because people are like, that is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy abilities, it's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that, like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's
I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to like end up with a sales pitch. Like, it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch.
Mm-hmm.
So the money system has to be safe. Like, your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like,
yeah.
or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to. Sam goes, oh, you won, like, our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers? In the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized, like, oh, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology. And where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like, this is the tactic of these offshore companies is, like, you put
It wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to, like, be that successful, that you're just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking. So when I see something like that go down, I'm like, how did he get Steven Spielberg? How does someone like a Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, how does he get these people to do this?
A lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the, like, most fair case you could make about, there was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. Everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token, though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November was when all gay. So, like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no. Basically, they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So, hey, you're going to be the guy. Like, was he on Twitter? I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and average. Like, you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like,
each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on amphetamines. That's the issue. Was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who, like, pushed over the house located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your.
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, there's some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interviews
and basically, like, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch. 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that, like, there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage money system. Especially in our modern age, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from. The average person is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver, A1Z, A16Z. It was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange, and the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. TT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion, but with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew at the end when you're ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me ask him some real hard questions, because all these guys are like, Sam, we're pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because
this stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. They had a Serum token, which they controlled most of. He blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer...
Figured it out, and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already... even leading up, CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but already, a day before... it means playing League of Legends while on investor calls. At the time, that was seen as this charming,
yes.
genius thing.
On calls.
Yes. You could hear even actually. Okay,
it's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with hucksters and fraud, where when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer. Of was going on. Now he's still trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent, and right now, actually, the big kind of reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. It's they need to. Okay, so this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. Ultimately going to find out what we're doing here.
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX, myself, they kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, we think they're insolvent, because we had taken a look at their numbers, and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the token. And from the arms of one huckster to another, it's almost to something worse. It's sort of hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, there's always a new health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they, there were things that were coming out, questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. Just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see them in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm I get fed a bunch of regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations,
and I'd go because it was my friends said, hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was kind of fascinated. and you'd see these guys, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud. Never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I notice with all of these things, the thread is because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you won. He launches Alameda Research First, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to. After the fact, he's like, he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? The handle now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep what that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our senator's office reached out to me. And they're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to, this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all are very strange. And these offshore entities were also using like U.S. branches. Like there's FTX U.S., which was like more regulated, but not really that regulated. It's right. The inflation rate, I think, is like 75% or something like that. Like it's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time. Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it. Right. It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was smart thing, which is something like this happens, you shut up. You don't say anything.
Right.
And then you point at your boss. I mean, that's basically what they did.
Oof.
Which they for sure did stuff wrong to that token. Then you sell it off, and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. Executives Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. Everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So
analogy for losing your house?
You know what's funny? Yeah.
You know, I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say I backed that bill, and now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're, like, trying to retool it.
One guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. Like it was very opaque. I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like they had hidden all their numbers. Like that Sam had knew all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington, $10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet?
Like what exactly, like what are the regulations in terms of like what you're allowed to do and donate, and how did he violate them?
So I think the big violation was you're not supposed to, all these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal. Assets. You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
And it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill, like, was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly like tokens like is the individual, you can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin, then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum. So before, it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1 and then you're sending $1 to all to expose, but like I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about that. But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me, I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me, you can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But so by the third interview, I'd studied him and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to, it was the terms of guy who enabled God, or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just like,
well, how does he skate on that? Like, how?
And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, he's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Like they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX. Wow. Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
He lost it on the platform. He says the 18 million was on FTX or whatever, and he never got $1 out of it. But that was what the deal was for. I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any, or something like Europe or something like that. Is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, they're really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange.
People that were standing out and saying none of this makes sense.
Right.
And who were those people?
So there were a few people. There was teas for a while, but I eventually pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers, and I wanted somebody to say
easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot. What they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, there was fungibility between wallets.
And probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was saying FTX US was funny, but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's not actually this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became an
whiz kid who you listen to him talk. He has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
And one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. They have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us. We're not going to touch it. We're not going to move it. That's what FTX will fall for something. Doesn't mean you're safe. Like you have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, you know, it's almost used, but I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American. So that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, you know, a lot of people had you withdraw. There's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address because you send it to a different one. Is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all how you're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He's this thing. So all this money's going in. And then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time
and a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that first of all, it was amazing that he felt like he could do.
Reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says, what I know is everyone's always interested in pulling up the ladder after them. And like building the kind of the rule book around like, hey, like if you're from this certain jurisdiction that we're a part of, you're fine. If you're not, like I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old, just buy my course. My course is, you know, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So what are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch. And then, well, you know, there were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted a person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, you know, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems. But basically screaming about, you know, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten out. Somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, has a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?